Hi, everyone. Good evening. Uh, yeah, I know we are coming towards the end of the day, so 20 more minutes. I hope this is bearable. Two very boring topics, insurance and cyber, right? So I'm going to be talking at the intersection of both for the next 15, 16 minutes or so. I represent a company called Swiss Reinsurance. As the name suggests, it is a reinsurance company based out of Switzerland. Right? We are, more than 150 years old as a company. About $43 billion in gross written premiums. About 13,000 employees in 70 countries, approximately. Right? So pretty big. What we do for a business, as a business, is we insure other insurance companies, right? So, we underwrite their risk, they underwrite your risk, so that's how it goes. My job at this company is to look at one particular area of insurance called cyber insurance, and figure out a way to make cyber risk understandable and quantifiable for us to kind of underwrite it, right? And as you can imagine and understand, cyber risk is an emerging, landscape. There are new threats, emerging every day. So it kind of becomes very difficult for you to kind of, create models that can predict the severity of the risk and the frequency of the risk from that perspective, right? There is historical data available based on, previous claims that are filed, under cyber insurance, but then they do not capture the emerging threats, for example. So that leaves a big gap for us to kind of, compound. So my job is to kind of understand that landscape, understand various variables that typically should go into a formula that we can potentially create, and then use that formula to kind of assess the cyber risk for any enterprise anywhere in the world, big or small, right? Irrespective of the industry. And then the second step is to kind of convert that cyber risk into insurability, right? So I'm going to be talking about that a little bit in detail. So what is cyber risk, right? I'm just going to start with the basics. We look at, the thing called digitalization. So what's happened because of digitalization over the last many years is, there's a lot of data that companies are now managing. There are a lot of interconnected devices, a lot of assets that companies have in the cloud. And that has led to more and more cloud adoption, because there's so much of data, so many assets now that you can't possibly keep everything on-prem. You have to kind of migrate to the cloud in some form or fashion. So that's natural. What that means is you have all of a sudden increased your attack surface. What I mean by attack surface is anything that a potential hacker can look at in terms of your company's footprint, in terms of the assets that you have on the cloud. And now all of a sudden there are multiple ways for hackers to kind of get into your system, right? Because so many applications are on the cloud, they can find a backdoor into any of those, and you can't possibly control everything at all the time. So now there's an increased risk because of cloud migrations and adoption, right? So the likelihood of breach has gone up tremendously because of that. What are the consequences of that? Business interruption from a potential breach. So if somebody gets into your system, right, locks all the data, encrypts it, or takes it away, right, or brings your website down, your business loses a lot of financial value. Purely because, the business is not able to transact business in the first place for that duration of time, for example, right? Imagine Amazon's website going down for 2 hours because of a cyber event, right? They'll lose billions of dollars, in those 2 hours. So that's the kind of impact that we're looking at because of cyber risk. Now let's, and these are some examples of various techniques and ways that hackers can get into your system, DDoS attacks, phishing. You pretty much know all those details anyways, so I'm not going to go over them. Insurance, right? And I'm not sure how many people have some form of insurance background, but I'm just going to walk you through this slide pretty quickly, but in a very simple manner. Insurance is all about risk transfer, right? There's so many uncertainties in the world, in somebody's life, that you're always trying to kind of hedge against those, right? And what that means is when you're looking at insurance, whether it's home, property, auto, cyber, marine, life and health, all you're trying to do is buy some form of protection from an insurance company and saying, I'm willing to kind of give you so much money, but you have to undertake so much of risk on my behalf, right? So all insurance companies do is take the risk on your behalf against money that you give to them, right? So there is a bit of a conflict in that because, you as a consumer always want that, most of my risk gets transferred over to the companies or the insurance companies, and the insurance companies do not want to take all the risk or most of the risk anyways because it's against their interest, right, at the same time. So there's, always a conflict going on around that. And if the risk is somewhat not fully measurable, right, the only option that insurance companies have is to increase the premiums to kind of cover against a potential loss, right? And that's why you see in the cyber insurance world that the cyber premiums have skyrocketed over the last few years, right? Starting from COVID times to Russia-Ukraine thing and other, world events, and there's no set formula that underwriters have in the insurance companies to say if this and this and this happens, this goes into my pricing model and the insurance premiums become this. Especially in the case of cyber, there is no set formula that I know of, at least, right? It's all tribal knowledge. It's all, how you feel, what's your, gut telling you at the end of the day. And then you might decide sometime that you see a company, it's a payments company or a bank or a financial institution, right? And you say, I'm not gonna insure that sector, right? I don't care what level of security do they have, but I'm not gonna play in that industry at all, right? I've seen companies make those kind of decisions too. So, and it's all because, once those high-risk companies, enterprises get a breach, the amount and the severity of the claims is so high that it can put an insurance company down, right, end of the day. So they don't want to take that risk. So what that leads to is something what we call a cyber coverage gap, right? And let me take an example to kind of explain what I mean, right? So when you look at businesses in the US with about $1 billion of revenue, there are about 2.5 million companies, approximately, right? When you look at how much are they paying for a cyber insurance policy, it's about $1,800 per year, right? So you look at the total cyber coverage, it's about $4.7 billion, right? Multiply 1 and 2, you get 3. If you look at the historical data, in terms of cumulative cyber losses, meaning, what was the financial impact of all the cyber events that happened in the same period, about $6.9 billion, right? Based on the claims that were filed and tracked, by the government agencies. So if you see the difference between 6.9 and 4.7, that's what we call a cyber coverage gap, meaning, you got this much money that was not covered, taken care of by the insurance companies, and that led to some kind of losses. And primarily because these small businesses did not have adequate cyber insurance or the right coverages under cyber insurance policies, right? And I'm gonna show you what those coverages look like before we go to the more AI and ML kind of thing on this. So these are the typical insurance coverages, right? So you can cover yourself for reputational damage if you're hit by a cyber event. You can cover yourself for cyber extortion, meaning, if somebody hacks your data, he or she can, hold you at ransom and say, if you don't pay me, I'm going to leak your data to the public, right? That's extortion. You have business interruption. If somebody brings down your website and you incur a business loss because you can't make money, you can't sell your products. You got ransomware, right? Somebody encrypts your data in your environment and you can't use your own data. Hospitals, big issue, right? Patient data. You can't, operate on patients if you don't have access to the systems that have their medical, records. Incident response cost is another big area of, cost categories in insurance, which is legal, outlays, forensic costs, PR costs, et cetera, that the company would have to bear, right, in response to an event. And then you have, any loss of digital assets, for example, due to a breach. So those are the typical insurance covers that exist in a typical cyber insurance policy, right? Now, the problem that we faced, before we kind of got to a solution to kind of fix the problem here was, how do we convert? I mean, there are tons of companies, who can do security assessment very well. You go to, Threat Connect or somebody else and say, Cisco or Palo Alto, for example, they have some amazing security assessment tools, right? And you can look at what vulnerabilities exist in anybody's cloud environment and you can go and fix them. And CISOs do that all the time, right? You can do NIST CSF assessments, ISO 27001 assessments, and you can, look at what's bad in your environment and you can go and fix them, right? So all good so far, tons of data around that. But when it comes to the insurance companies, they don't understand security. So there's a translation gap, right? The underwriters understand risk and coverage. If you tell them, secure for a particular company, it's a 4.8 security score out of 5, right? What are they going to do with that, right? How do they map that score into coverage gaps and coverage calculations, right? So that's what we were trying to kind of figure out, if there's something that's possible to do. So what we thought was a good enough solution was, you have the security assessment done for a company, and you look at the industry security benchmark, right? So let's say you're a hospital, your security assessment says you are above average, 4.6 out of 5, whatever, right? And then you look at the industry average also for security, and if the industry average is 4 and you're 4.6, obviously you're better than your peers, right? So that's one way to kind of look at it, and that's useful. Then you look at the new and emerging threats, right? So things like hacker chatter, for example, right? You can look at the dark web, you can monitor a lot of hacker chat and say, what are the hackers talking about? So somebody is talking about Starbucks and all of a sudden, you see hundreds of people talking about Starbucks all the time, right? And so in those hacker chatter forums that Starbucks is gonna get hacked pretty soon, right? So that's an indication that you get. It's intuitive, but at least it's useful intel for somebody to know. Then you have the breach probability, right? So once you have the security assessment, you can look at what's the likelihood of that company getting breached, right? Based on the vulnerabilities that you found, based on the gaps that you found, et cetera, right? Assuming they're not fixed. And then you can put all this context together into a mathematical form and say what is the financial loss if an attack were to occur, right? So you look at parameters like what is the number of employees, do all employees have multi-factor authentication installed or not, right? Those kind of things. How much PII data does a company hold in their environments? Is it PII, PHI, PCI, credit card data, et cetera, et cetera. So you kind of try to quantify all those assets and add those variables to your equation and try to predict the amount of financial loss based on the likelihood of breach that you try to calculate. And then at the end of the day, you try to develop some kind of a rating based on all this, right? And that rating, if it's a low rating, an underwriter can figure out or try to judge if he or she wants to insure that particular company or not, right? And that's the end goal for us, right? So the way that we kind of solutioned this whole thing was, we look at the breach likelihood for any company based on the method that I just described. We calculate the expected loss based on that breach likelihood relative to that industry security risk, and then you determine the insurability. And these are some of the common ways that you could potentially do that. Right? You can do security assessment using one of those, methodologies. You can estimate the financial risk based on, looking at historical claims and also the size and the type of the company and the industry of the company that you're talking about or dealing with. And the end product is the classification of a company, whether it's insurable or not. And if it's insurable, then you look at the coverage limits as I described in the previous slide in terms of those 6 or 7 sub-coverages. How do you kind of break that coverage estimation to those categories? So that's the overall framework in terms of how we kind of brought about this solution to the market. So when it comes to machine learning and statistical analysis and techniques, we used all of these techniques to kind of get to where we are. We use semantic analysis to kind of understand the structure of the data and understand the variables that we need to consider, because there are, to be honest, hundreds of variables that could be considered, right, in this equation, in this formula. So you have to kind of pick and choose which are relevant, which have a higher weight versus the others, right? Use Bayesian modeling to kind of do analysis of new data or the threat landscape that's emerging. Because again, as I mentioned, in the cyber world, there are new threats coming up every day, and you have very little or no data in terms of those threats when you look at the historical claims, right? And hence the Bayesian modeling for that. Then you obviously use the supervised learning approaches. I've taken a few examples on the slide. There are more than one ways to kind of do that, and then you start to train your models and see what kind of outputs you get. Simulations could be run using Monte Carlo and logistic regression for the historical claims data to kind of get a financial loss estimation. Again, so you need to have some confidence levels in this, so that every time the solution makes a prediction, it comes at some level of confidence, right? So underwriters need to understand if they're saying the score is this, the company is insurable, are they saying it with a 90% confidence or a 20% confidence, right? So we do need a level of confidence in those decisions. And ultimately, it's the underwriters who would make a decision towards it. But this provides a very objective, comprehensive way to convert a cyber risk assessment, a security assessment, into an insurability analysis that maps to the cyber coverages that we kind of talked about. And hopefully this technique allows for the insurance industry to open up their capacities again towards the cyber risk that they've been closing down for the last couple of years, because the understanding that cyber risk is something of an unquantifiable topic in itself, right? So that was the vision for us to kind of make it quantifiable, and also to make it a industry standard in terms of adoption. And coming from Swiss Re, the hope is that a lot of companies take note of it. We put a lot of risk engineering, machine learning, our own domain expertise in cyber risk behind the product and the solutioning, and I hope this takes away. This is a brand new product, by the way, that we're launching soon, so fingers crossed for that. In terms of industry advantages, obviously there's a risk reduction that we're looking at. There's more capacity. Capacity means how much money an insurance company can offer to the market to cover cyber. That's what capacity means. And insurability readiness, essentially, for enterprises. Right? That's it. Thank you.